start my video here. Okay, great. So my name is Seth Killian. I'm one of the co-founders of Linko Language Labs, and I'm here with one of the French instructors at Michigan State University, Matt Konevsky.
Howdy.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk about would be, transitioning to online learning, because it seems like, in the last week or so, everybody's really been thrown into a new situation. And so, it might look something like this here, where, it started out with the semester, and then we said, we might have to go online, and well, now here we are. So what we want to do here is we want to talk about some really simple strategies on how can we take what we're doing in the classroom and move it online. And we're going to implement a lot of these ideas that we're talking about in this presentation. So I'll make sure that's recorded, that way we can send it out, and then you can go back and review it. And we'll also send out the slides as well. So a few things that we're going to talk about: the difference between remote and online instruction, because even though there are online classes, it's not exactly the same thing as what we're doing right now. Talk about some of the different situations that everyone might be in, and then really talk about how can we stay connected, ensure there's continuity. And then we'll talk about a few different resources that we have that we think that can really help. So the first thing to know is, even though we're talking about online instruction, this is really different than actual online instruction, like an actual online class that we would typically start with. So for example, Matt, you're a online instructor, but you also have a lot of in-person classes. What would you say are some of the big differences that you're seeing?
Well, I think one of the differences is that, kind of what it says in the slide, is that for an online class to work, there's a lot of sort of preparation that goes on ahead of time. And unfortunately, for many of us, we've been kind of thrown into this, okay, as of tomorrow, we're going into online classes, and some of you can probably sympathize with that. And so teaching online is quite different than teaching in person, obviously. And so this kind of last minute, try and figure out how I'm going to turn my in-person classes into an online thing, is not really the same thing as online and as what we normally think of as an online course. Typically, online courses tend to be either a mixture of synchronous and asynchronous. There's just more that goes into online, a real online course, where the students know that they're signing up for an online course. The expectation is that they do certain things by certain time points during the semester. And for what we're doing right now, which is, I guess, more akin to what we would call remote instruction, the students didn't really sign up for this, right? And depending on if you're at a university or if you're at a high school or a middle school, there are all kinds of other restrictions and specificities to your individual situation. And all of this is sort of being thrown on everybody at the last minute right now. So that's some of the differences between remote, I think, and typically what we would think of as designing an online course.
And so, keeping in mind the idea that remote instruction with, what we're really looking at doing right now, and online instruction, building a course from the ground up to be online, we need to know that we can't be overly strategic. Now is not the time to design your dream course to try all these new features. We want to really focus on keeping it simple and continuity, and that's going to be really one of the themes of this webinar. So one of the things, especially with designing an online course, to think about is the Dunning-Kruger effect. So in the beginning, when many people became instructors, for example, you think, well, it's teaching, it can't be that hard. I'm sure you run into a lot of parents who think that, oh, well, it's just teaching. But I'm sure, as you found out, as you get deeper into your careers, there's a lot more to it. And this is the biggest thing to be aware of with online instruction right now. Here we may be, here right now where, I don't have a lot of experience with online instruction. It must not be that hard. But as you get deeper into it, you'll find that there are actually a lot of differences. So it's the whole idea of you don't know what you don't know. And so to mitigate that, we want to just really focus on being simple.
And so I guess I would add just one thing to that, and that is simply that it's not as simple as just flipping a switch from the face-to-face position to the online position. That at least at Michigan State University, what we've discovered is that every time we think that, okay, well, we'll have a policy, we'll have, this, or this, and suddenly 5 other complications that we hadn't thought of kind of come to the forefront. We're like, oh, we hadn't thought about that. Well, how do we handle that? And so it's this idea of everything. It seemed kind of simple maybe at first, but as we got deeper into it, we realized that it's much more complex to get a whole bunch of different sections in French or in Spanish online than, we originally maybe would have thought.
So one of the really interesting things about, the current scenario is everybody who's on this webinar is from different schools, different, educational institutions where they might be higher ed, they might be K-12, they might be public, they might be private, they might be in different states, different districts. Everybody's doing something different right now. And so we think that we can categorize this or classify it into a few different scenarios. And we have the in-person instruction, which is possible, though we're not certain how long that would continue if there are still in-person classes. The synchronous instruction, where that's kind of what we're doing right now. The idea that the students are tuning into a live class, they're interacting in real time. We have breakout rooms, whiteboards, screen sharing, but it's the closest thing to bringing in-person instruction online. We have asynchronous instruction, previously recorded lectures or things that are supposed to be kind of on your own, discussion boards and other online activities. And then there are a lot of schools right now that are doing what we might call, I believe we've heard in Michigan, to be enrichment activities. The idea that asynchronous is completely optional, and the big emphasis is on no new materials, strictly review. And then there's the last category, just the early vacation. So I'm going to launch a poll here, and I'd love to hear what's your current situation. So is it that your school is online and you're teaching classes there? Are you in person? And when we say the school is closed and I'm not teaching, we mean enrichment by that. So I just sent the poll to the chat. I'm curious to see what your current situation is, because that will help us really figure out, what should we be focusing on. And especially with it being so different across, all the states, we'd love to see, what are the big, scenarios that we should think about. Let's see. And somebody message in the chat if you don't see the poll. Let's see, it should be in progress. 29, I don't see a poll. Okay. Let's see. That might not be launched. Well, how about this? In the chat, say what your current situation is. That way, we can all see. So would you classify it as synchronous, asynchronous, or mostly enrichment? So add in the chat and then we'll see. Yeah, it looks like there's some kind of issues with the polls. So it looks like Jasmine's, enrichment. There's synchronous and asynchronous. That's fairly common. We were told to teach remotely using both synchronous and asynchronous. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that makes sense. Enrichment. So it looks like there's a lot of, across the board. But what I find really interesting is I see a lot of, synchronous. So that means that there are a lot of situations where the instructors are doing a live Zoom call and everyone is tuning in. So with that in mind, we want to talk about a few, differences that you're going to encounter. Because especially with synchronous instruction, the danger is that it's so close to in-person instruction as far as, everybody's meeting at the same time. It should be fairly similar, but there are actually going to be a lot of differences that we need to make sure that we're looking out for. For example, the first thing is, your students are at home. And so there are a lot of distractions that you have to be aware of. And so think about it, the siblings are home, the parents are home, and this isn't what they're used to. And so, a lot of the students will see it as almost kind of a snow day. And so with synchronous instruction, they're going to be, a lot more differences than you might expect with just in-person instruction.
Yeah, one of the other issues I think with synchronous instruction, and this may be, well, I'm sure it's more applicable at the university level than at the high school, middle school level, is you run into time zone differences, when students go back. Again, we teach one class at 8 a.m. and I had a student that said, well, I'm going back to California. Do I really have to be in this class at 5 in the morning? That was an easy one. We said, no, you can go to a different section that's later in the day. But I mean, it's those kinds of issues that you may run into with synchronous and it gets into the whole notion of, requiring attendance also, right? So is it really fair? I mean, again, at the university level, we have students living all over the world, really. And so some may be in rural areas where they don't have internet access. There may be cost issues, socioeconomic, issues where students don't necessarily have access at home, and that's why they come to a campus because they didn't sign up for an online course. So there were those issues too with synchronous instruction. And again, you can maybe give a thumbs up or something in the comments section if you guys are experiencing that. In a high school setting, it might be a little bit less of a problem, possibly, just because it's more homogenous because everyone's coming from sort of the same town. But we've definitely run into this at MSU.
And I think definitely a big thing with, synchronous instruction is, this is very new to the students. And so, for example, when you ask a, question in class, typically you'll have, student responses, but maybe in a synchronous setting, it's a video call, you have 20 students who are all on, their own laptops, you may not hear as many responses. And so using things like, chat or using, polling, using some of the other tools that we'll go through, I think can be really helpful. So these are kind of just the different scenarios to think about. And it's certainly important to really classify yourself to think, where am I on the spectrum? And it's also possible that this may change over time, especially, with this being the first couple of weeks of online instruction, a lot of districts and schools are still trying to figure out what to do. And so it's very possible that, enrichment may change to asynchronous, or synchronous may change to asynchronous. It's still a very, dynamic situation, as I'm sure, all of your administrators have mentioned. So with that in mind, we want to have a few, takeaways or a few ideas. The first thing is it's very important now more than ever to stay connected with your students. So, there's so much going on right now in their lives that they're not used to. They're losing out on their, senior prom, the state, tennis championship, and things are very chaotic for them. And so being able to stay connected, I think, is really one of the most important things. And we'll go through a few ways that you can do that. The first one would be having virtual office hours. Now, this is very common in higher ed, where you can say, if you need to come by my office, 3 to 4 on Tuesdays, I'll be there. But even for, K-12 and higher ed as well, saying, every Thursday from 2 to 3, I'll be on Zoom. Here's a link you can drop in. That really makes you accessible to the student. It allows them to, ask questions and to really just check in with you. The other way that you can stay connected is, when you are on video calls, think about, having your webcam on, have it in a well-lit area. Even things as simple as making eye contact with the camera, that can make all the difference for the student. In cases where you're doing asynchronous activities, think about how you can make it easier for your students, or look for opportunities where you can stay connected. So for example, on Linko, we'll show you how you can create video recordings of yourself to add into the activities. We want to make it as close to normal as possible. Now, that's going to be very difficult because, here we are in this situation where nothing is normal, and we're going to have to try a lot of new things. But just the little things that we can do, such as, adding daily video updates, having office hours, recording yourself, as much, input that you can provide, I think will be really helpful for the student. I see that a few people have talked about Remind. Remind is an incredible app. It's a way that you can, use messages for your students. You've used Remind a lot.
I use Remind a lot, yeah. And actually, so I use Remind for sort of maybe what it's intended for. That is, hey, don't forget, test is tomorrow, that kind of thing. Hence the title. But I've also used Remind in my classes to send out the question of the day, so a quick multiple choice question just to make sure maybe students got the main idea from a chapter that we're doing. So for example, I teach a phonetics course at Michigan State. And so did they get sort of the main idea of chapter 3 kind of thing, and give them a quick multiple choice where they can respond via Remind. And again, it's just another way of just remaining connected with your students so that they don't feel isolated back at home. I mean, they're still supposed to be in the semester, I guess, right?
Right. Karen asked, can it be used on Chromebooks and not just phone? Yes, there is a web interface.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have both the iPhone, Android apps where you can send messages. And then they also have the actual text messaging feature. And for those of you who don't know what Remind is, the idea is that it's an application where you can send messages and communicate with your students, parents, and other stakeholders without actually sharing your phone number. So if everybody's in the Remind class, then you can say, I want to send a message, don't forget the chapter 2 homework tonight. You can send it to everyone. This could also be a great way to communicate with parents. Parents now more than ever are really up in the air just as much as the students are. They're not sure, what should my student be doing. This could be a great time to reach out to them and say, join the Remind class so you can see how we're communicating.
And so to Remind it's been around for a while now. It's completely free, by the way, right? It's completely free.
For our situations, for the classes, yeah, absolutely. I think they have like a couple hundred student limit, but in your case, I think that you should be okay.
But it also has a robust community of users also. They have a Facebook group as well, and it's just a robust community of users that can offer help and or ideas. It's a great, I love it.
And another thing, as Matt kind of mentioned, not just staying connected with your students and your parents, but with each other. I mean, this is a very new experience, and anything that we can do to communicate, share new ideas and concepts, I think this is definitely the time more than ever to do it. I mean, it's been incredible how instructors have come together so quickly and really just made it happen.
Yeah, so again, I teach French, and I know there's a lot of language teachers in other languages. I don't really familiar with that, but even under quote unquote normal, operating procedures before the coronavirus, I found that a Facebook page called French Teachers in the U.S. Was really nice and useful. It has a lot of resources on it. And also, I taught high school before this, before I came to MSU. And, I know in a lot of high schools, especially if you're a Spanish teacher, there's usually more than, it depends, could be more than one. But for a lot of other languages, you might be the only teacher of that particular language in the school. And that can also be a somewhat isolating feeling. And so, these kinds of communities out there, like this French Teachers in the U.S. Facebook group, and I'm sure there are others for other languages, are really beneficial, not just for resources, but also for camaraderie, also for batting around ideas, and maybe even more so now that we're all supposed to be, holed up in our homes. So.
No, absolutely. So, think about yourself as well, because there are a lot of resources out there. I know it seems like almost too many, but there are a few good things out there. And I certainly recommend joining a couple of Facebook groups. Those could be great resources. So the other thing that we want to focus on, in addition to, really staying connected, is, having continuity. Like we mentioned before, this is something that's completely new for everyone. Students are not used to learning online from home. This is something that can take, a long time to master, and now everyone's being thrown into it. And there's a lot of information coming from a lot of different directions. So we want to make sure that we can, keep things simple. So the first thing we would say is, create routines. So say that, every Monday and Wednesday, we're going to meet at this time, or every Monday and Wednesday, you will have the same, type of assignment. You will have like a vocabulary set to learn, or you're going to have this type of activity. Whatever you can do to take the guesswork out of it can be really important.
And again, if I can just jump in here for a second. So I taught this morning my phonetics course, and I just asked that we had like 2 or 3 minutes left at the end, because we're meeting during the regular class times that we would normally meet on campus. And I just said, okay, so everybody, how like, how's it working for you? You know, is this, are you finding this helpful? Is it, you know, are there problems that you're having? Anyway, one of my students actually said that she really appreciated that we were meeting during our normal class time, you know, again, synchronously, so as close to face without being in the same room as you can. And I think what she was really getting at was that just sort of having this routine in this very abnormal situation was kind of important. And I think I saw a lot of the students kind of nodding their heads like, yeah, it's good that we're doing this. So.
And so whatever you can do to keep things as, you know, the same as possible, as much as possible. So for example, when you have a Zoom meeting, do you have it scheduled so it's every, you know, Monday and Wednesday from 3 to 4? Or are you sending your students a brand new Zoom link 5 minutes before class every single time? So whatever you can do to eliminate any, you know, possibilities for confusion, you know, that can be really, you know, important now more than ever. Another thing is just checklists to say, you know, for this class on Tuesday or for this week, here are the 5 things that we're looking to accomplish. You know, here are the 5 assignments, here's where to go to get them. Having kind of one place where they can go for everything is going to be, you know, really important. And that kind of jumps into our, you know, next idea of less is more. And so it's easy to think that, you know, rigor is somehow, you know, the same thing as a massive volume of work, but you really want to focus on, you know, the learning outcomes. What are you actually trying to accomplish? This is not the time to, you know, overbuild, especially with, you know, all of the online tools that are coming at you. I can't even imagine what your inbox looks like right now. I'm sure that you have, you know, a mountain of emails, you know, try this new product, it's free, come jump on board, whatever it'll take. We had a question from Claudette about what if students don't have anything more than a phone or no tech at all? So with Remind, you can actually subscribe, so it will send you a text message. And so it's meant to work if it's just a cell phone. And so if they have that, that would be the recommendation as far as for Remind.
Yeah, so one of the other things, I mean, it's a phenomenal question. It's something that we've been struggling with actually since we were told last Wednesday by our university president, you know, everybody go home at 12 o'clock, right? And it gets into something we'll talk about, I think it's on the next slide, just about expectations. And that is that your expectations will probably have to change, right? So, you know, there was all this talk about, well, we can still keep attendance on Zoom because we can just have them turn their cameras on and we can keep attendance. But again, you start to find out very quickly that not everybody's going to have internet access, right? I mean, as I said earlier, I mean, we're in Michigan. Some people live up in the UP where they're just in a very rural area. There's no access and a million other reasons why, right? And so is it reasonable to expect that somebody, you know, I don't know, drive 2 hours to McDonald's to be able to get internet access? I mean, and so there's no answer to that question. What about students who don't have anything other than a phone? Other than, you know, every case is going to be probably a little different. But I think it comes down to managing expectations and saying, can we possibly have the same requirements / expectations for this kind of remote teaching that we do in face-to-face under normal circumstances, because the circumstances aren't normal. Do we have any suggestions for elementary school students?
I think that's going to be a challenge, especially if they aren't, you know, used to technology. And, you know, I certainly, when I was in elementary school, I wasn't logging on to, you know, Schoology to go get my assignments. And so that's going to be an extra challenge because now, you know, the students are going to be reliant on, you know, the parents. And so I would say, you know, in that situation, having a Remind class can still be just as helpful for the students as the parents. In that case, you know, being able to distribute it to the parents to say, you know, hey, here's an activity
right,
for them to do. But also being very clear to the parent, you know, like here are the instructions, because they're not used to, you know, being in a class. They don't know what, you know, a lot of the content is that you're presenting. And so we certainly recommend, you know, less is more. Again, you know, keeping things simple.
And I was gonna say, if it's interesting, and just we can come back to the elementary school question. I mean, I'll fess up and say I'm not an elementary school teacher. It's a little hard maybe for me to answer that question personally. Maybe other people can pipe in. But just about this notion KISS, you know, the keep it simple, silly, right? the idea of limiting the number of platforms, again, when we first started planning for this, we were thinking, or some of us were thinking, okay, well, we can use Google Classroom for the writing assignments, so we can use this for this and this for this, and I think we have to keep in mind that, students also are taking, a chemistry class and an English class and a biology class, and there's a limit to how many different platforms students can be expected to, need to access. So again, just limiting the number of platforms, maybe reducing your expectations about what students can sort of do at home. The last bullet point, I think I've heard from a few different people, because my daughter's in high school, and so I've heard from other parents that, these kids are now at home, and so some of the older ones may have to watch younger siblings now, and they have responsibilities that they may not have had before everybody was sent home. And so it's not that they have all this extra time to do all their schoolwork now. So again, I think it gets down to, again, this notion of maybe reevaluating some of what the expectations are.
So absolutely. One of the sources that we found recommended to have half of the actual, workload that you would have in class, because it really comes down to the quality over quantity. What are you trying to accomplish, and what can we do to make sure that you're able to continue your instruction, but still while managing the expectations. So there are a few suggestions that we have. The title of this webinar is transitioning to online language instruction, and so this kind of goes back to the different routes or the different scenarios or situations. So there are a lot of great tools that you can use. For example, Zoom. That's something that we're relying on heavily, but there are a lot of ways, as you think about, managing your expectations and converting your work to be online, of, what can you do to actually, modify it so it still works. Remember from that first slide, the idea is with remote instruction, we're trying to continue what we're already doing and move it to online. Now, of course, we need to manage our expectations with that, but there are a few different ways that we can think about doing that. And this slide will be here, as we send it out. But this is just kind of an added resource for ways to think about transitioning your current content. So we said that we're going to talk about tools. Zoom is an incredible platform, as you have all found out. Being on here, it's hopefully fairly easy to set up. And Zoom has also done a lot of great things for K through 12 right now. Typically, the free tier, so completely free, would have up to 100 participants, and it would have a 40-minute time limit. But Zoom has actually set up a program where if you verify that you're a K through 12 school, then they'll actually remove the time limit. Also, something to keep in mind is traditionally Zoom would have a dial-in capability, but they've removed that just to the high volume of calls. If your school has a different license, for example, Microsoft Teams is a common one, Google Hangouts is another, Skype, a lot of them will have very similar features, but at least from our experience, we found that Zoom has been probably one of the best platforms when you're looking at having, 20 or so, synchronous conversations. So it's what we highly recommend. With Zoom, there are a lot of things that you can do that can be really helpful. Screen and file sharing, the ability to use chat, especially given that most students will be less likely to say something on a video call than they might in person. And so being able to really rely on the chat, students are used to texting, so leverage that. There's also the whiteboard. And for many cases, especially if you're a K through 12 instructor, Zoom gives you a lot of capabilities, such as the ability to mute other participants. That could always be helpful. But in addition to the whole idea of, students may not talk as much as they might, in a traditional classroom, you don't have the cues that you might normally have in face-to-face instruction. There are a few other tools that you can use. So for example, on Zoom, you have the ability to raise your hand. So for example, if we go to look at the interface, you can see here's the host. So the instructor or the student, the participant can raise their hand. They can say yes or no, go slower, go faster. Other options include I need to take a break. And so the participants panel is very helpful for instructors, because you can see if a student says, I like that or I don't like that. You can say, thumbs up if that makes sense, thumbs down if it doesn't make sense, say yes or no. And so definitely leverage this. You know, the good thing about this generation is they're used to texting, they're used to Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. They've done it. And so they're going to be very comfortable here, you know, leverage that. And so you can see Zoom has made it very easy to realize easy to use. And then if a student does click raise their hand, then it will notify you. So you'll see, you know, Seth Killian just raised his hand. And that can be a kind of a cue to look at the chat, because especially if you're doing screen sharing, you might not realize that a student, you know, has a question or sent a message. Going back to this, there are a few other features that may be useful. So recordings. Zoom has made it very easy to create a recording. You can save it as a file, and then you can upload that to YouTube. So if you do run into cases where, you know, attendance might be an issue, think about, first of all, you know, is this worth recording? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But if it is worth recording, then you can record it, you can upload it to YouTube, and then you can add a link on your you know, learning management site for them. The other thing is, you know, we're used to having, you know, individual discussions or, you know, group discussions as language instructors. That's something that's, you know, very common. And so having, you know, breakout rooms, and especially with the whole notion of, with, you know, language instruction, the whole idea is, you know, communicative learning. Breakout rooms can be great for this, and especially now more than ever. I mean, I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, so the breakout rooms are great, right? Because you know, in a normal setting, right? You say, okay, everybody, you know, get into groups of 2s or 3s, and then you give them some activity that they need to do. And that's exactly what the breakout rooms can do. From a technology standpoint, it's nice because you have a lot of control over it. You can jump in and out of groups. And so, for example, I was teaching and I was just jumping from group to group to group. You know, go into a group, come out of a group. And, you know, students have a little bit more one-on-one, just as if you were kind of walking around the classroom and, you know, a kid, you know, has a question. My suggestion would be, though, that if you're going to use the breakout rooms, because, as you know, we all know that, you know, when we teach, you know, the students never get off topic, right? They never start talking about other things, right? No, I mean, of course they do. And it's even more of a temptation to do that when they're in the breakout rooms, because, you know, you're not in a physical classroom. My suggestion would be then that, again, in the spirit of communicative language teaching, that what you do is when you break the students into a group, that they have to produce some kind of a product. And when I say product, I don't mean, you know, a paper or, you know, something like that. But I mean, you know, if you break them into groups and you're doing, I don't know, the future, you know, the immediate future, you know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, you know, they have to, in the groups, come back to the whole class with something that, you know, I learned, you know, that my partner and I are similar because we're both going to do 2 of the same things, or something to that effect. Where, again, it's an actual communicative activity. It's not just, you know, conjugating verbs, because they're not going to. I don't know. They're probably not going to do that. But if they know they have to come back and determine, okay, me and my partner, you know, we're going to have a similar weekend because we're going to do the following 2 things together. Again, there's your communicative goal, and so I would recommend something to that effect when you send them into breakout rooms.
And right now it's such a great opportunity to have them, you know, do discussions, because think about it, you know, they haven't seen each other in, you know, maybe a week, and perhaps, you know, this is now more than ever the whole idea of, you know, with communicative instruction, you're trying to communicate the idea, to try to share new information, to learn something. And so even talking about something as, you know, simple as, you know, what did you do today? What did you buy at the grocery store the other day? You know, things like that. Now, of course, if you're higher on the actual proficiency scale, you'll be able to do more with that. But I think that we can really leverage the situation at every scale or at every level. So maybe it's something as simple as providing a vocabulary set of, you know, here's some of the common words of, you know, around the household. You know, talk about some of the things that you're doing. You know, what room are you in right now? You know, do you have any pets? You know, things like that, where you can really leverage the whole idea of trying to you know, communicate with each other.
Again, if I can just jump in for a quick second, just if you haven't used Zoom, or if you use Zoom and haven't used the breakout rooms yet, it does require a little bit of planning ahead of time, simply because if you're teaching, for example, say in a PowerPoint, and you have the activity on the PowerPoint that says, step 1, step 2, step 3. The problem is once you go into the breakout rooms, the students no longer have access to that. So it means a little bit of planning ahead, where you're going to have to either send them something, maybe you just take a screenshot of that and put it into a Word doc, or you send them the whole PowerPoint presentation or something. And if you do that with a PowerPoint, I would recommend numbering every slide so that you can say, okay, I've sent this out to you, open up the PowerPoint also, and on slide 23, that's the activity for your breakout session. So just a...
And the other thing is, with Zoom, it's also fairly accessible. So from any platform, whether it's web, desktop, iPhone, or Android, typically you can call in, but as they mentioned, with the free tier, that requires dialing in, which is not allowed currently under the free tier, just because they don't have the capacity. One person asked, if they can record themselves in the breakout rooms. I believe that the only person who can that actually may be possible. So there are two different ways that you can record. There's the actual host who would be recording. So for example, what we're doing right now, and when people are broken out into rooms, then it's not recording those individual students. But I believe, and we would have to check their help documentation, which is very good, by the way. I believe that if the participants are recording it, then when they go into a breakout room, that should be recorded. So that could be a possibility. You'll have to make sure that you enable the ability for participants to record themselves, though. So another thing that's a really big issue right now would be internet access, right? There are many people who don't have internet access, or it's limited, it's not fast enough. But what we've noticed in the last couple of days is a lot of companies have really started to step up. So depending on where you are in the US, Comcast is a great way to go. They have the $9.95 Internet Essentials, and they're giving 2 months free on top of that. And when you go to purchase the Internet Essentials, they'll actually have a $149 computer available for purchase. So if there are students who don't have access to a laptop, then that could be an option to think about. And what they'll do is they'll actually send you a self-installation kit. So in most cases, if the house is already wired for cable internet, is all they would have to do is plug it in. And so I've looked at the installation steps, and they look to be fairly easy. The other thing that is great right now is if you go to any public place, they have the Xfinity Wi-Fi hotspots. Now the problem is, of course, with self-isolation, social distancing, that might not be as helpful. But I can say, at least at my own home in Michigan, I'm near a local coffee shop that has an Xfinity Wi-Fi hotspot, and I can log on to it from there. So do we know if the inexpensive computers have a webcam? I'll have to check. I think they do. So what it is Comcast has a refurbished program where they're taking computers from a bunch of different manufacturers that are used, and they have a minimum number of specifications. So it's at least so fast, it has at least so much storage. I'm not sure if they have the webcam, but what we did is we included in the link to these slides, we have the link directly to that, and they go through the specifications. I would imagine most webcam or most laptops in the last few years would have a webcam. It might be a hit or miss, but we'll see if they guarantee it. The other thing is the Keeping Americans Connected pledge, which was put out by the FCC, and most major providers, I know AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, and T-Mobile have all signed it. And they're saying, we're going to waive the late fees for 60 days. We're not going to disconnect anyone. And in many cases, a lot of providers are reducing or removing the data caps. So there are some cases where instructors are using a cell phone and Wi-Fi or a personal hotspot. But if you only have 3 gigabytes of data per month, that's not going to work very well. And luckily, a lot of providers have really stepped up and said, we're either going to remove the late fees and remove the caps, or do something to make sure that people stay connected. And we've left links to both of these in the speaker's notes on the slides, which we'll send out. So the big thing is, you remember, rigor doesn't mean massive volumes of work. And with many instructors having the first time instructing online, it's easy to really overdo it, to say, go to this website and then this website, go to these resources, look at this worksheet. Really focus on the idea that, less is more. Really, what are you looking to accomplish? And whatever you can do to stay connected, keep things consistent and simple, that's what you really want to focus on. So with that in mind, we wanted to show you a demo of, Lingo, the platform that we have, because it was built from the ground up for language instructors. And so it can function as a full learning management system. It can be your one-stop shop for everything. So we'll look at a few ways that you can actually take your current existing content and move it over to an online platform. So if you have Zoom, then you can handle the synchronous instruction, but then with Lingo, you can handle everything asynchronously. So here we have our dashboard. So the first thing that you'll want to look at is the content library. And remember, this is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to go back and reference it, and we'll also send out another video on getting started. But I want to show you in the last couple of minutes just a few things that we have to offer. So creating activities, whether you have in-class assignments that might be worksheets or things that are online, this is the one-stop shop where you can create something that's automatically graded and easy to access. So for example, if I create a new question section, we have the content, which is everything that I can give to the learner. So maybe I want them to watch a video. So I drag and drop the video. I can decide to grab a YouTube video, I can upload it, or I can record it. And remember, we mentioned earlier that anything that we can do to stay connected is really the best thing that we can do right now. So for example, maybe on Lingo, instead of typing the instructions, record a video of yourself saying the instructions. It's another way that you could actually communicate or connect with your students. So certainly take advantage of that. So we have the content. That's everything that you give the student. Maybe it's video, or maybe it's an audio file. So perhaps you want to record yourself. Bonjour, ça va? So we have the content. It's what you give to the student, but then we want to wait for them to respond. So those would be the prompts. So in this case, let's say we want to have it where they watch a video. So maybe they watch the video first, and then we ask them an audio prompt. So here's the video. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la population mondiale? Comment il est évolué? And so, disclaimer, as a French minor there, my French might not be up to snuff, but I imagine yours is better than mine. So here we have the video, and then we have the audio content. But then we want them to respond, right? So that's where you would use a prompt. And so you can see here, that's where the student would actually record themselves. And so when we click create, we can see what that would look like for the student. So there they have the video, they have the audio, and then they have the actual response. So you can see as all that was would just be simple drag and drop. We also have multiple choice, ordering, fill in the blanks. We even have a feature where you can use voice recognition. So for example, let's say we have an audio prompt where it's bonjour, comment t'appelles-tu? And then also we will be sending a meeting or a recording to this. So if anybody has to jump off, we'll make sure that you have the recording and all the resources. So perfect. So there's our prompt. And then for a response, maybe we want je m'appelle. And then the name. So we can test that. Je m'appelle Seth. And it can automatically grade it. So there are a lot of really neat things that you can do with Lingo for the resources. You can see you can do a discussion board. So this is where you could have students, respond to it. So maybe you have the video. You said, qu'est-ce que vous pensez? What do you think? And so there are a lot of opportunities here with these activities to build something that can be easy, but also, really useful, especially with the fact that most of these can be automatically graded. So multiple choice, fill in the blanks, matching, ordering, all those can be automatically graded, which means that the students can get instant feedback as well. So we saw what, one of those activities might look like, but then let's look at the grading interface. So here's an example of a sample class that we have where it's a French course and they want to record a can-do statement. So here we have a preview of what that might look like. So what are you going to do next week? What a perfect prompt for right now. And so, here describe the same thing for the partner, and then talk about if your weeks are similar, different, and why. So they go through the prompt, they respond to it, and then it's time to grade it. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to build a platform that was very easy for instructors to grade things. And so here we have our submissions. And so what we can do is we can select the students we want to grade. We can either grade by question or by section. If there are multiple sections, then we can actually filter those. So maybe only show first and third hour. And so we can grade by question, so all of the number ones and all of the number twos, or we can grade by students. So 1, 2, 3 for the first student, then 1, 2, 3 for the next one. So here there's only one question, so it doesn't really matter. And so here we have the grading interface. And what we can see is, here's the prompt. So I would listen to that. And you can see there they have the recording. And of course it's not playing since it's through Zoom right now, but yep, absolutely. We'll talk about an LMS integration. We can integrate with all the existing platforms. And so here we have the prompt that we want to grade. Well, what you can do is you can actually highlight it and you can leave a text comment. So maybe I want to leave a text comment here, or you can also leave an audio comment, yet another way that you can connect with your students. So we highly recommend using this, and we've tried to make it really easy where you can annotate and give good feedback. And then for the grading side, we've designed a rubric system where what you can do is you can make this as simple or as complex as you'd like. Here we have multiple categories. So with this can-do statement, we're looking at the content, the form, and the fluency. And for each group, we have sub-items. You can see one item is worth 4, 3, 2, and 1. And we've set that up so you can actually grade it fairly easily. So these are all linked to keyboard shortcuts. So I can say, open up number 2 and then press Q to select that one. And you can create any kind of combination, but this will eliminate the need to retype the same thing. So that's what the grading platform looks like for Linko. And we also have a full grade book. So everything that you need to run an online course is on Linko. So we have the assignments, you saw how you can actually build them. We have the grading features where you can easily grade it. And then we have the full grade book. Now this is one of the larger classes, so it takes a second to load. But you can see here how we can have all of our assignments here. You can see we have a breakdown of all the students and really everything you would expect. You can also export. So for example, if you have Canvas, you can click export as a Canvas CSV. And it'll automatically or put it in a format where you can import all of the assignments. So that's the overview of our activities. And then the other thing that we have are the vocabulary sets. So here I want to create a vocabulary set. Maybe a lot of instructors already use something like Quizlet, and they're looking for a way to take what they have and put it online, or on a platform where you can actually give grades or see feedback. So I'll show you how you can take your existing content and move it into Linko. So let's say I create a new vocabulary set and I click import. Maybe you go and find your Quizlet set. So for example, let's say I'm doing a set on French house vocabulary. I click export and I copy it. Well, now I can actually import it. And there's all my content. And so now I'll go ahead and click create set, and it will generate all of the audio files for that vocabulary set. So it'll take a second to go through, generate each of the ones like in a French accent. And so then when the students actually click, they'll hear it. So now here we have the vocabulary set, but now we want to click learn new terms. And so this is one of the features about Linko that instructors have found most helpful. It's the idea that the computer will predict how well a student knows a specific vocabulary word, and it will predict which words they should be learning next. So it's kind of like a smart Quizlet. So I click learn new terms, and it will actually start with a learning session. And so you can see it starts out easy with multiple choice from the target to the native language. And then as we progress, it will start to ask more questions. And you can see if you make a mistake, the computer will just say, that's not correct, and it will resequence it. So you can see it starts out, fairly easy. And then, is that the oven? Stove. Right. And you can see since I made a mistake there, it showed up again. And so it's great because it's self-paced, it's on the student to do it, but you can also see it didn't take that much time for us to set it up at all. And so you can see we're focusing on table and stove, but now it's going to have an audio question where now I listen for the different audio ones and I'd pick the correct one. And that was actually just by chance since I don't have my audio on. If they don't have access to audio, they can actually click this and it will turn off all of the audio questions. So you can see they go through it, and then as it progresses through, it will ask different question types. In this case, it's really focusing on the multiple choice, the audio, and then the ones that you need to focus on more, you'll see it. So how are the multiple choice created besides the correct word that comes with Quizlet? Well, what it's doing is the computer is drawing from all of the options. So you put in the vocabulary set, says, this is microwave, that's bed, that's stove. And then the computer finds similar options and it's going to pick. So see how we have table, then night table. What it's doing is it's actually picking what are the ones that are most similar to it. So then they would actually type in the word. So all of the choices are coming from the same set. Yes, that's correct. So another thing is accents, right? So we all had to memorize, Alt Shift like 32 or something to get like E with an accent and goo. If they actually need an accent, then they can just hold down a key and then the menu will pop up with all of the options. Is that micro?
Yes.
Yeah. And so then if I make a mistake, notice how it will actually point it out and it will say, it looks like you made a typo, but here's what you need to actually focus on. So the computer is actually trying to give them, good feedback. And it'll have them, type it in again until they get it correct. And then they can move on. So then we have refrigerator. And so then I'll go through these. And you can see each session typically will have between 20 to 25 questions. I'm not even, we'll see how this goes. This is why you don't pick a vocabulary set that you don't already know to demo. All right.
All right.
Like that.
With the two accents.
All right, there we go. And I'm going to hand it off to the professor to get through this one for me. So the idea is that you should be able to take your current content that you have. Maybe it's already on Quizlet. Maybe you have a worksheet and you put it into the activity builder. Well, now you have an online activity.
What? Oh, I typed wrong too. Oh my God.
It's not just me. But that's the good thing, but it's also, the double-edged sword about, Linko, where, it makes you do it until you get it right. The good thing is, though, the students really actually end up appreciating that in the end. So here will give me a breakdown. It says, here's where I think you are on all these words. And so now if we go to the end, you'll see this one, review in 12 hours. These ones I'm still working on learning. The nice thing is the computer is actually predicting when should the student come back and review the vocabulary. And that's the big advantage. What makes it different than Quizlet? Well, the computer's predicting for each student, how well do you know each term and when do you need to come back? And so as a student, what I would do is just click learn new terms again, and it would create it. So if you've already created a curriculum, can it move the curriculum to an online format using Linko? Linko, absolutely. Linko, think of it as like an online toolbox. So we don't have a specific prescribed curriculum that we're saying, you must use Linko for, Unit 3 French. We don't give you the Unit 3 French. You would put it onto Linko. The idea is that you have the toolbox, so you can work on bringing it on. So one of the questions was, why does it only show a few of the same vocab terms? Well, that's actually one of the features in Linko. So let's say you have 30 words to learn. In many cases, what the student will do is they'll go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 30. And then they'll go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 30 again. With Linko, what we do is we actually chunk it and we group them into small groups. And we say, learn these first 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, really master those first 5. Okay, now learn 5 more. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now go back and review them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So you can see how it moves through the set in groups of a few terms at a time. So you'll notice on that last session, I only saw, stove, microwave, refrigerator, table. I'm seeing those same terms over and over, but I'm really focusing on those ones. So we want to make it easy, because I'm just as guilty of being the French student in high school that said, well, all right, I got to the end of the chapter and now I have, 45 terms to learn for my vocab quiz tomorrow. Time to go 1 through 45.
I mean,
do it again.
As I'm saying, the whole point is, at least from a vocabulary standpoint, is getting it from short-term memory into long-term memory, right? So that we all know cramming will help the day before the test to maybe get the answers right on the test, but cramming doesn't really help for long-term vocabulary retention. And so that's kind of the idea behind Linko, that you learn new words, but you also go back and you review old words. And then Linko, what Linko is attempting to do, or the artificial intelligence is attempting to do, is to make predictions as to when is the optimal time for the student to go back and review that word.
Somebody asked, can we add pictures of vocabulary? Yes. We have a stock photo library that we're already linked to. So as you can see, I was able just to type in the words. And as an added feature, it will add in image questions now. So it will show, Frigo, now which is it? Is it a picture of this? Is it a picture of that? And that allows students to really get into the target language, even more. So it's not just English, French, French, English. I know we're running on the last couple of minutes. The last feature that I want to show you would be the analytics. So we know that these students are supposed to learn the vocabulary and review it. But now as an instructor, you can look back at the statistics for a vocabulary set and for a class. So you can click on the vocab stats on your homepage, and you can actually see a breakdown of what are your students doing. So we can see when the days of the test are, because, well, that would be when, for this French class, the number of sessions completed skyrocketed. And so what we said is, okay, well, really don't cram as often, start a few days before, because then you can come back and review it again. And you can actually see here, we implemented the feature in early November, and we saw how it started out, where there would be a huge spike. But then towards the end, the students actually started using Linko a few days before the vocab quiz. Novel idea, start actually studying a few more days before the quiz. And you can see how it flattened out, and how there are more blue sessions, which are the review ones. That means when it said come back in 4 hours, they did, and they reviewed it. Then it says come back in 12 hours, and they come back in 12 hours and review it. Then come back in 2 days and review it. So it actually increases the time in which they should come back to review it. So as kind of a summary of all this, we talked about making sure that you keep things simple. You want everything in one place. With Linko, you can easily do that. You can say, I want to have my one French course, and in the modules, maybe I want to have my Zoom link, I want to have my vocab set, I want to have my activity. It's all in one place. You tell them just go to Linko and the rest is going to be there. In the modules, you can build out your checklist. You can keep it simple to say, step 1, do this activity. Step 2, do this other activity. We've given you kind of a course management platform, but specifically for language instruction. And so that's what we want to do. And I believe everybody on this webinar should be signed up, where you can go to your school, or you can go to log in. And I believe we sent out instructions, but if not, we'll have them attached to the recording for this webinar, which should follow shortly. So as of now, you can go into Linko, you can create a course, you can create activities, you can create vocabulary sets, and then you can invite your students. So inviting your students is as simple as clicking, add new students, giving them an access code, or sending them an email. And so then they'll be added into the class, they'll be able to see the assignments, you'll be able to see them on the gradebook, and really everything you need to continue learning. And as I said before, it's completely free to the end of the school year. In fact, we've turned off all charging functionality right now, so it's completely free. We encourage you to use it, and any way that we can help, certainly please reach out. With this little chat bubble in the right corner, you can click on it and it goes directly to us. So if you have questions, if you like suggestions or feedback or anything that we can do to help, we really are here for you right now. All right, well, thanks everyone. And what we'll do is we'll send out a link to this, the recording, and we'll also have instructions for signing up. Really appreciate everybody joining us in such a busy week, but keep in touch. We have a Facebook group that we're going to send out invites for. Let's stick together, and we'll all get through this. You guys are doing an incredible job, And hopefully the added benefit is that instructors will realize that teachers deserve to be paid much, much more. Just give them a few days. They'll say, wow, we should give teachers $1 million a year. So, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this off there, but I'll send out all the resources. And like I said, feel free to reach out, and we look forward to, hearing from all of you. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.